saw that stupid was truly stupid, and he had time to tear the world apart and split the people into tribes. He said that war can have a winner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 782 with a review of The Order. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're talking about a film that may be coming to a theater near you. It seems like it's getting a weird release with weird times in our city, but maybe this is something that everybody can see. It is a film where we're going to potentially catch at TIFF. We missed it. We are now able to see it, which is pretty cool. And Stephen, we've been sort of excited about the change of the world of the movie landscape, about how like a thing will come into theaters, and if you missed it, it might be on VOD like 3 weeks later, depending how it's doing it. And then before we go to a festival, and that movie might never come out, or it might be out the following year or several months later. But now it seems like festival films have taken on the old normal release window for VOD and stuff, and or not VOD, but like normal releases, and then the at-home situation is like down to just a few weeks. So it's pretty cool that like almost everything that we saw is already out, and some of the things that we didn't get to see are out now. So yeah, I think it's a good, as much as the movie industry seems to be dying, it seems like it's pretty cool that we get to see a bunch of this stuff now.
I agree, yeah. Yeah, I like seeing how these movies evolve. And I mean, to be fair, TIFF is one of those festivals that tends to be like this wants to be an awards contender, so they often come out pretty soon. But I'm sure there are a handful of things we saw that will never come out still. But that percentage is definitely lower than it has been in previous years.
Yeah. But yeah, this is, I'm glad that we did get to catch and talk about this. We're also going to try to fit in a review of Flow, which was our random pick for the week, and then we found out that The Order was playing and switched it up last minute, but we're going to keep those things together as best we can. Anything you want to say before we get started, Stephen?
Just that I really knew very little about this movie. I think you and I both just knew a picture of Jude Law holding a gun when we were debating watching it at TIFF. And yeah, I don't know. I recommend going into more movies that way, because it's kind of rad to watch something having no idea what you're about to see. And it is rare in theaters that I still have that experience, but I did this time, and I support it.
I feel like this has been a recent theme with our the last several episodes. Well, that's not true. The last 2 episodes, that's definitely not the truth before. But I feel like
I had no idea what Gladiator 2 was going to be
about. But anyways,
you are right.
Yeah, the films before that were definitely like, I don't know, let's see it. Okay, cool.
I think it's that the things get buried, and the trailer economy is very different than it used to be. So it used to be like the big things coming out, I would know about it because I'd be seeing trailers for like months leading up to it, and I would have a really good idea of what I was walking into. And I feel like now the release window, things just kind of like appear that I've never heard of and then disappear 2 weeks later. So it's more of a game of like whack-a-mole to try to catch them all.
Yeah.
Pokemon, that's how you catch them all.
All right. Should we get started, Stephen?
Sure.
All right. We are going to take a listen to the trailer for The Order and then come back and give you all a review.
Now, in every revolution, someone has to fire the first shot.
Open the safe now! Now! Let's go!
Sheriff Laughlin, Terry Husk. I had a question about some flyers I keep seeing. White power. Is that the Aryan Nation?
You know what my problem is with every fanatic?
You have to have somebody to blame for your life.
Remember those pamphlets you saw? It's not all. This was in June. A bomb went off at a synagogue in Boise. That's just the beginning.
Beginning of what?
This book holds our birthright.
It tells the story of a group of white separatists waging a race war against the United States government.
We don't advocate any of our members breaking any laws.
But some do.
Well, you must understand that. Being in a cult like the federal government.
Why'd you call me about this case?
I need your help. Paid groups don't rob banks.
go. There's 6 steps in that book. Recruiting, training, fundraising, assassination.
What's 6? Large-scale domestic terror attacks.
Come on!
Take him now.
Get out of here, dear!
Numbers they get.
Let's go!
3.6 million. What does that buy?
Buys an army.
It's happening. War's begun.
You've drawn too much attention.
From who?
The FBI. I've warned you before. You are playing with fire.
You're not from here, huh?
You following me?
Good morning, my brothers. We want you to join us on a mission, putting words into action. Will you stand up and fight to survive?
This terrorist group of yours have a name?
In the book, they're called The Order.
Defeat. Victory. Defeat. Victory. Defeat. Victory.
All right, so that was the trailer for The Order, and it is basically about a lone FBI agent who is trying to take on a group of domestic terrorists that may be connected to the Aryan Brotherhood. Steve Miller, what did you think of The Order?
I thought this movie was harrowing and kind of amazing. Honestly, it is the kind of movie that I feel like I don't see a lot anymore. I'm sure other people have compared it to this, but I felt the way I felt when I watched Sicario, where it was just this kind of very dark, confidently made, bleak. Thriller is the wrong word almost, because it isn't like this always moves at the pace of a thriller. It's just like a foreboding, gloomy, terrifying look at something that, in this case, was an actual real threat that existed in the U.S. and still definitely echoes today. I don't even know how to explain why this movie was so good, which is going to make a podcast episode kind of difficult. I just 5 minutes in, I just felt like I am in amazing hands with Justin Kurzel. Like, he is doing something that I trust that he's going to carry this tone for the whole movie. I am in for a troubling ride. And that's what I got. Like, I think Jude Law is pretty great as this grizzled FBI agent who you can tell that he is, at one point, he may have been like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and had some kind of ideals about who they were fighting and how to deal with them. And now he has just kind of learned he has no niceness left in him. Like, the world is too evil and he just has to be as like direct and quick in confronting that evil as possible. Nicholas Hoult as a white supremacist group leader is unbelievably good in that role. And it is so different than anything I have ever seen him play before. It is shocking to me that this is the same guy who played the person we are meant to relate to and have a moral quandary with in Juror Number 2, because like he couldn't be more different here as this kind of horrifying force that we like have no interiority to, and we don't know what he could possibly pull from moment to moment. And like everyone in the cast is totally solid here, but I really think what the movie is about is like the banality of hate and how hate can still be terrifying and dangerous and can still take over the world even when it's stupid. You know, like off mic, just a few minutes ago, you were talking about how there's this chant that Nicholas Holt's character starts in a Aryan Brotherhood church of like, defeat never, victory forever. It's something just dumb, like completely bird-brained, idiotic like chant. And that moment, when I watched it in the theater, my audience let out a kind of a chuckle, like a laugh at it. But to me, that is actually what makes this so terrifying, is these people are fucking idiots. Yeah. And it takes so little to motivate them, to make them rally around a cause, to get them to do things just to feel a sense of community or feel a sense of power. And I really feel like this movie is about like how easily that like hatred can fester. And it honestly, in the current political environment, it kind of made me feel very unsettled, because I was thinking, like, how many people are just lurking out there right now who are the equivalent of these like Washington rural folk who are just like waiting for the right idiot to come along and say the right words that will make them try to burn everything down. I really just thought this movie was kind of incredible in how like consistently it carried that dark tone, and I was just kind of captivated the whole way through. And I still don't know what makes it so great, because it isn't that showy. It isn't like there are big moments where I think, oh my God, that is when Justin Kurzel proved that he's an incredible director. It's just like, it feels foreboding the whole way through. And great is the wrong word to describe the time that I had, but I had a riveting experience in the theater. How about you? What did you think of The Order?
Yeah, I mean, like, riveting experiences. A pretty good way to sum it up. In recent reviews, I've talked about sitting down to watch something and feeling like the film was reverse engineered from the thing the film was trying to communicate. And this film, I don't think suffers from that at all. I think the film is sort of a thesis on how little energy it takes to start a movement that can have very disastrous plans. And also a secondary thesis on how any bit of terrorism, domestic terrorism, whatever, that you've experienced in life that seemed like this crazy master plan was executed perfectly that caused like great destruction. You're like, oh my God, how could we not have stopped that? This film kind of posits that like it was on the edge of like it's basically a nothing burger. Yeah. That rolled down a hill and created a giant snowball that dragged everything with it and caused momentum enough to cause destruction. Like it's like this group of people is being brought together by nothing, like literally nothing. But somebody with charisma can focus their hate and their anger and maybe just their hurt into action that has no real like ethos behind it. It's just like, we got to do a thing, and people are like, yeah, we got to do it. Like nobody explains how any action they're going to take in this film achieves their end. It's kind of like what we were joking. I was, in the episode of Gladiator 2, I was joking about how like everybody talks about like their dream of Rome and like what they have to do to achieve it, but nobody explains what the dream is or what it would mean if we had it. That is like basically a fantasy film. This is a grounded, realistic film that shows that like people act with no real understanding of what their actions achieve. And like people are willing to do great violence to achieve ends when they really have no fucking clue what it means or any idea of how their actions will actually lead to meaningful change, but they just feel like they need to lash out and do something. And I think that this film, like, it's weird watching Nicholas Hoult's character where you're like, fuck, I can see how people would just follow somebody like this.
Yeah.
Like somebody who's just on the fence walks into one of those meetings and is like, yeah, somebody's saying all the things that I feel, like what I mean? And then suddenly people are just wrapped up in something and uncontrollably participating in something that goes way beyond what they expected. And this film just shows that so well. And, stepping back from like the social message of what it's trying to say and like the scary realities of what it's portraying, this is just one of those films where like, I was like, man, why is this not an HBO series that I could just sit in like a mini, like I want 6 episodes of this movie.
Yeah. You want like a True Detective of it or something.
Yeah. And Steven, this is going to be a crazy, crazy idea here. But, in the film, there's a book that has 6 parts. You just have 1 episode per part, right?
Yeah. Turner, the book of Saw.
I just like it literally writes itself, right? Like it just seems like this is right for that. But like we watch a film where there was so much communicated about the past histories of characters. It's never stated. You don't know like what's going on with Jude Law's physical condition, what's going on with his family, what's going on with his like person that he interacts with, that they seem to may have been partners of some sort in the past. Like, you know, there's so much stuff happening in the story that I'm like, I could spend a whole episode on just this one character and what their life is like leading into this moment. And it like, this film just does so much to like make you sit and wonder and want to be part of whatever's going on, not be part of what's going on in the story, but like you want to sit in the story and like learn about so much different stuff. But it kind of just teases about the history of the world and really just focuses on this one thing. And I found it really captivating.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. There's just something about, I can't put my finger on it, but there's a sequence that takes place when I think it's on the 101 around Eureka or something. Characters in the Order are robbing an armed vehicle, and the way that was shot, the tenseness of it, the way I felt watching it, it reminded me of like the opening scene of The Dark Knight or something. Like it felt like, oh, I am watching like confident evil, and there's just something assured and terrifying about this thing. Like I couldn't put my finger on it. It just, I don't see it a lot. It's like Denis Villeneuve does it occasionally. Christopher Nolan is capable of doing it. I can't think of a lot of other things in the last like 10 or 20 years that have had this like very dark, heavy thriller tone. And this being grounded in something real, like literally a real phenomenon that happened, which I shockingly didn't do a Wikipedia deep dive of afterwards, but I definitely plan on at some point. I don't know. It just struck a chord with me. Like I kind of famously had issues with Sicario, and they were not filmmaking issues. They were like ethical issues, because with Sicario, it was like the evil was the other people, the drug lords in Mexico. And it was all kind of like stoking this very bleak portrait of other people in a way that felt like xenophobic or reckless or something. And here I have a movie that is doing that with a group that I have absolutely zero problem hating, like, with full intensity. And there was something like honestly refreshing about being like, oh my God, I can fully hate these fucking people. Yeah, it was a good movie. So, okay, important question. How long did it take you to realize that Marc Maron was opening up the movie?
The second I heard his voice, I was like, this feels like the weird tone to have Marc Maron be in this movie.
I was the same way, but at first I was like, is that Marc Maron? Would they really do that? Like the equivalent of a podcaster? Oh, yep, they did. I do feel like this movie, I was trying to figure out what the quote message of the movie is, because you were describing this movie definitely does have a message, and one is how easily hate can fester. But I think there's something telling in the fact that Jude Law is the quote protagonist of the film. And like you said, we don't get a lot of his backstory. And this is kind of like, in some ways, a traditional cop story if they just like cut off all the things that make you know about or care about the cop. Like he's grizzled, he's seen some shit, he has a young recruit who is going to be corrupted over the course of the movie. But I feel like with the Jude Law character, this movie is basically screaming like, it isn't glorifying him, but it's saying the only way you can deal with hate is by cutting out the bullshit and like aim the gun straight at them and shoot. Right. And I feel like there's a kind of like visceral, angry message here that is like, stop beating around the bush. Stop trying to be nice to your fucking friend from high school because you want to be polite and you want to be a kind person. Like, this is terrifying, and you have to like confront it as a like immediate threat. I don't know. I was trying to grapple with like, there's a closing shot that I guess I won't spoil, even though it isn't a plot point. It's just like a symbolic point. But I feel like it's trying to say something there about like not letting yourself get numb or not being tricked into sympathizing with people who are hateful. And I don't know, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, but it felt like a kind of stirring image to me.
Yeah. For me, like the primary, and once again, this is all interpretation by me, but to me, the primary message of the scene or the film is, and I'll speak ambiguously as possible, there is a scene towards the end of the film where Nicholas Hoult is typing something on a typewriter, and he hands a stack of this thing to a person. And to me, one of the primary themes of the film is that person's response to him handing him in the context of what that scene is.
Right.
And I think that for me, like when that happened, I was like, Jesus Christ, this happens every single day.
Yeah.
Like there are so many people with nothing that are causing almost, you know, quote unquote revolutions from their point of view, but that are just totally fucked up, like wrong-headed. I don't know. It's like that for some reason, that scene sort of what it builds to and what that interaction means is kind of like the primary thing that I keep thinking about when I think back on this film. And I don't really know what to do with it exactly. But like, one of the things, we've had so much crazy shit that has happened, you know, over the last several years that have like caused me to rethink things that I watch in films. And it's that I always think when I'm watching a film, what would have to happen for me to be in the bad guy's shoes?
Right.
And I think that the way the world is going, it's making that grayer and grayer in a way that, like, when I watch things like this, I'm just like, gee, like, it's so weird to see how close to everything just falling apart things can always be. And it makes me think about, like, if everything is falling apart and everything goes to the worst place, do you just take it? Or do you do something about it? And then I'm like, shit, that's literally what they think right now. That's causing them to act in the way they are. And it just, like, it's a thing that, like, I just constantly think about and struggle in my head as like a thought experiment. That's like, eventually you tip over, you know, eventually you live long enough to see stuff become the villain. You know what I mean? And it just like, I'm just like, it's so weird because, like, I can see how anybody makes the leap to doing evil,
right,
for what they think is good. And I think that this film, it's clear this entire film who the bad guys are.
Of course.
And this is not a gray film, but it causes me to do the gray work to try to think about stuff, you know. And it's just I don't know. It's an interesting.
No, I hear you. There's
live.
another element of the film that I kind of would need to think about more to see how much it's played for. There's a moment very explicitly where a white nationalist, the pastor of the Aryan Brotherhood, so he is like the mildly less extreme, you know, version of the splinter group that became the Order. I say mildly less because I'm sure he was still like outrageously terrible, right? But he is talking to Jude Law, and he is kind of comparing the FBI to a cult in its own right. And there are a few times throughout the movie where that comparison, it's almost like a kind of hackneyed thing of like, hey, the good guys are following a system just like the bad guys. You know, The Wire was all about this too, right? Like, you're like mirror images of each other. And I kind of feel like this movie is throwing that idea out there, but then saying with all the visuals, no, they are not mirror images. Like, these people are fucking terrifying. And I would need to think about it more to see like what it's trying to do there. And because this doesn't really have that many examples of, in a typical fictional story like this, a Zodiac version of this, basically, Jude Law would get more and more obsessed, and that obsession would lead him to be more and more reckless, and more harm would be caused, and there'd be some degree to which he has become as extreme as the people that he's trying to fight. And I don't think this movie ever does this, even though he does become desperate and angry. And I don't know what the movie wants me to do with it, basically. I feel like it is treating it differently than they normally would. And the only way I can describe it is like the movie is exasperated with how evil people can be and how easily evil can pop up. And it's like, in response to that exasperation, it is just like a fucking stomach ulcer and a drinking problem. And like, it's doing something that I find very interesting and subtly like different than the kind of cop tropes of the grizzled partner who's seen too much shit before. And I don't quite know what to do with it yet.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like, he is not at the end of his leash and just going wild. He is just like, he wants to not do it, but he's like, if not me, then who?
Yeah.
So it's not that he's like, yeah, fucking kick over the world because I need to stop the terrorists. It's like, he's like, fucking, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
But if I'm not here, then somebody else is left, holding the whatever, and they're not necessarily going to care as much as I care. So somebody's got to do it. Like, it's a genuine, like, energy that he's putting into it. He just is basically already given up at everything to be where he is, and he doesn't need to be there, but he's like, I got to stop this shit.
Mm. I need to tell you another, there were 2 laugh lines in the movie for my audience. Maybe a few more. There were a few times where the white supremacists are just being patently stupid, that got a kind of like, it wasn't a laugh so much as like a spiteful, like chuckling at how dumb they are. But my favorite kind of incisive moment about them occurs when they're all at the church. It's when Nicholas Hoult is like starting his speech that had the chant that you mentioned earlier. And the way he starts it is like, my Aryan brothers, and it's like a hoorah, and my Aryan sisters, and then it's like a trickle of like 3 people going like,
4 girls that are like,
and I was like, yeah, what? This is just such a fucking damning indictment of how closed-minded this group is.
And the worst part is that one, the 3 women he was talking to, he probably impregnated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which, how long through the movie before you were like, wait, he just brings his mistress around to his other stuff that he's doing? And then I was like, oh, like when you finally get a little bit of the backstory on why he is bringing other ladies around, I was like, oh, weird.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, I don't know. It like that moment, I don't know if it was being played for laughs, but my audience definitely chuckled at it. But overall, it's like the movie is exploring Nicholas Hoult as this kind of, at once he's a terrifying, charismatic figure and also very kind of basic and rudimentary. It's not like he has like a ton of deep thoughts. He just has this kind of like desire to act. But then it's also about like the machinery that allows this kind of hate to grow, right? Like the wives, the friends, the people in the community who know that it's there and are just like, oh, they're out by the lake, don't mess with them, they're not going to mess with you. And I don't know, it just looked at it more directly than I feel like I've seen a movie do in a while, of the people who are around hate and maybe they don't believe in it, but they don't believe against it enough to do anything about it, and just how easily apathy can kick in and make it super easy for groups like this to spark over and over and over again.
Yeah. Or like at the Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving, I was going to say Thanksgiving, like the 4th of July style barbecue where the kid is just learning how to shoot a bottle.
Oh,
and you're like, that's not weird to anybody.
Yeah.
That a child is trying to shoot a gun that's about half the size of their body. And everybody's just like, oh, yeah, good job, kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I know this is the wrong message to learn from the movie, because it, whether explicitly or not, it's clear this movie is also meant to provoke you and be like, hey, there are alt-right movements today. There are plenty of hate groups still out there. This is not a localized event. But I gotta say, watching this movie, I was like, I'm never going to rural fucking Washington or Idaho. That is where, like, the craziest of the crazies live.
You're right. That probably isn't the.
It's probably not the right takeaway. But I just kept thinking, like, God, I do not want to be there.
But yeah, I do think that, like, going back to the one moment that I was keying on, I do really think that this is about, it's not just that charismatic people can lead groups of people to do bad things. It's that those people are almost always delusional. Like, in this film, Nicholas Hoult is working towards achieving a goal for the sake of achieving the goal. He doesn't know what it means for him to achieve or not achieve it. He's just following a script and executing on it. And everybody around him follows him because of how charismatic he is. But he is so delusional, he can't even realize if he's the dog that caught the car, he doesn't know what to do with it, right? He's just like, I followed the book. I achieved order.
Yeah. Well, and one of the steps that they're marching towards too is assassination. I guess I won't go into the details of who, but there is no attempt to connect that to anything or use it to build momentum or use it to recruit more people. If this were the Joker or whatever, if this were a supervillain, you would be like, oh my God, they are building their plan and they're going to be successful in their plan and they're gaining power. We are so terrified. But instead, like you said, it's no, he's delusional, but he can get a lot of delusional people and they can do a lot of damage in their quest to achieving what they think is possible, even if it isn't at all. And yeah, I think that is also an interesting twist for me too. They are scary because they can hurt people locally. They're not scary because you ever think they're actually going to take over the government or, do the thing that they want to do. They're scary because they're volatile and they think that they're important, and that gives them armor basically to just do things that a regular person would never think they could do.
Yeah. And it is too, we live in a more modern society where there's a lot of other stuff that you're dealing with in the world that might make some of these things more difficult. But when this film takes place, it's just open land where anybody can go anywhere, and just you can just have a van full of all kinds of guns and no one's gonna notice because everybody just has the guns. You know what I mean? At least now in our current society, it feels like the nature of modern day sort of gets us away from that sort of living style a little bit, at least as you said. I don't know. I'm not going.
By the way, no offense meant to anyone who might be listening to this from rural parts of Idaho or Washington. I'm not saying everyone is crazy. I know the craziest hate groups seem to live there. There's some combination of location and their proximity to big liberal cities creates some kind of, I don't know. No offense. I'm sure you listener are not crazy.
Steven, I know this podcast is available a lot of places, but CB Radios is not one of those places. I can't. Mm-hmm. They got a lot of CB radios in this.
They sure do. Yeah.
There's even one funny shot where Nicholas Hoult picks up the radio to talk on it, and the floppy antenna almost hits him in the face. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah. Any last thoughts about this before we get into verdicts?
Just that I don't remember what we traded for the order at TIFF. It was probably multiple things in some game of dominoes or whatever. But I do feel like I wish we had caught it at TIFF, because I think this would have been very different from anything else we saw. And I think it would have made for it would have just elevated the festival experience to have this type of movie in the mix.
Would you have traded it for Eden if you had the option? Another great Jude Law performance.
Yeah, but we don't. We see him in tidy whities here, but we don't get full dick. So I think Eden has to win. No, I would have. Well, I don't know, because Eden isn't out yet. So if the value of a festival is to see things that you might not get a chance to see in a while, then maybe we made the right call. Eden. But if you ask me, is this a better movie than Eden? 100%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Though, I mean, man, would you trade that performance from Ana de Armas? Because that film is so wild.
I'm glad I saw Eden. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I'm glad
I've been seeing
Eden
ads for Eden on Facebook where they're trying to emphasize the threesome idea of Ana de Armas with the two guys that she brought, and then it keeps cutting to Sydney Sweeney in between. It's trying to make it Challengers with hey, Ana de Armas, Sydney Sweeney, you're gonna get something cool. And I just keep thinking these people have no idea what movie they're about to watch.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and get into the verdicts then. Stephen Miller, if you're going to give this a must-see, rec with caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or must avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a must-see. I think it's just a extremely well-made movie that is harrowing and sat with me. And I think Nicholas Hoult and Jude Law both do really awesome jobs in the role. It makes me want to watch more of Justin Kurzel's movies. I've actually only seen True History of the Kelly Gang.
Yeah.
I didn't see Macbeth or Assassin's Creed, and now I wonder if I would see at least the origins of his tone in those movies, even if they're not as perfectly conceived as this one. I don't know. He really kind of, to me, came out of almost nowhere and became a director that is going to heavily be on my radar in the future, because it is hard to achieve a consistent tone like this, and he fucking nails it.
Yeah, this is going to be a must-see from me as well. There was a chance I wasn't going to get to see this. I was saving it for later in the week, and it turned out all of the screenings were slowly disappearing. So I'm very glad that I did shift our record times around to go see it. And I hope others either can see it now in theaters or at the very least on VOD at home once it becomes available. Yeah. Yeah, that is going to do it for a review of The Order. Stephen Miller, people want to find you throughout the week. Where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Yeah, we are going to take off, and then we're going to go sit down and record a review of Flow. So look forward to that in the feeds soon. Bye.
Bye.
And he wanted to go back, but by then it was too late, because stupid followed evil and there was nowhere to escape. Cause stupid followed evil and there was nowhere to escape.